Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Johnathan Holifield. He is a man with many talents. He's a former college football standout, NFL player, prosecuting attorney, and vice president at Bitwise Industries. Mr. Holifield is a recognized expert on competitiveness and inclusion in economics and education. He focuses on building partnerships in the public and private sectors. Johnathan was the executive director of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. He is passionate about giving rural and urban areas access to education, employment, and innovations in technology to offer them a competitive edge. He is the author of The Future Economy and Inclusive Competitiveness: How Demographic Trends and Innovations Can Create Economic Prosperity for All Americans. Mr. Holifield, welcome to the show today.
Mr. Possibility or Possibility Man, it is a pleasure to join you. Thank you for the opportunity to learn, share, and explore.
Okay, got a bunch of questions to ask, but first a reminder to our listeners and viewers, follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. Your support matters because it helps us attract guests like Johnathan Holifield. And look, I've already introduced you, but I want to dig a little deeper into your background because I really want our listeners and our viewers to get a sense of who you are. Where did you grow up in the States?
Yes, I grew up in Romulus, Michigan. Now, for your audience, if you've ever flown into Detroit, you've been to my city. The airport is in Romulus. So I grew up maybe 2 miles from the airport, right between Detroit and Ann Arbor.
Uh-huh. Now I know that you were an athlete. I'm not sure how athletic you are today, but what was your sport or sports, growing up there in Michigan?
Oh man, my neighborhood in Romulus, we used to call the Valley. We're small community. Romulus is not maybe 30,000, if that. My neighborhood had lots of athletes, man. We sent probably 4 or 5 guys to the NBA. I touched the NFL. Several more guys played college ball and so forth. So football and basketball was what we did every day. Played ball and competed very, very hard. And, in my day, whatever was in season, you played. I wrestled one year, played basketball, ran track, played baseball, little league one year as well, football every year, of course. If it was in season or something to do, we played.
Uh-huh. So at what point in high school did you recognize that you had the talent to play at the next level, the college level?
Yeah, that's another interesting aspect. And it informs another piece that I'll briefly talk about. I have an older cousin who went to college, and he probably finished 7 or so years ahead of me. So I was in the 5th or 6th grade, and I remember we were seeing him off and so forth, and his roommate. And when I came home, my best friend, we were both good athletes and we were best friends. I'm in 6th grade or so. And I'm like, man, when we go to college, we're going to be roommates too. And to this day, because he didn't have that kind of experience that I had with my older cousin, he really didn't feel me and he wasn't really hearing what I was saying. And it was, and that stayed with me because it was going right past me. And it was only because of my own experience with my older cousin that became a more real thing. Have aunts and uncles, or aunts in particular, that were school teachers and so forth. So college was kind of in our DNA. College sports, lots of great athletes in my family, uncles and so forth. etc., but hadn't gone to college. It
Hmm.
was a dream of mine, Stephen. And
Yeah.
as it unfolded, it was looking pretty sketchy. I actually captained my senior year of high school
Oh, wow.
a winless football team.
Okay.
We were 0-9. We lost
Mm,
one game 64-0. So
mm,
I didn't get any scholarship offers, none. Wayne State, you might be familiar with Wayne State in Detroit.
yes.
I think it
Yeah.
was Division III or something back then when I was coming up. They offered me an opportunity to play there. And through a relationship with a friend who was at a JUCO, that West
Mhm.
Virginia University was recruiting running backs. They were really
Mm.
looking for running. I was a running back. So my track coach and basketball coach sent them to West Virginia. They invited me as a walk-on. Said, sight unseen. I got that letter, Mom. I'm going to West Virginia University. I
Yeah.
hadn't been further east than Cedar Point in my life, but I'm going to Morgantown, West Virginia, and I'm going to play football. And that's
Wow.
really how it started. We'll give you this little nugget, if you will,
Okay.
conversation I had with our gym teacher. Now, again, I'm 17, right? And I have no idea where I got this. And he said, so Johnny, and family and friends and way backs call me Johnny. That's what I grew up with. Johnny,
Uh,
so you're not going to Wayne State and you're going to walk on at West Virginia? I said, yeah, coach, that's what I'm going to do. And he said,
mm.
well, you have a choice. You can either be a big fish in a little pond at Wayne State
Uh,
or a little fish in a big pond at West Virginia. Yeah, I'm
mm.
17. I had never heard that before. So something was in me, Lord, something, because I
Yeah.
shot that. I'm going to be a big fish in a big pond. So
Wow. Wow.
I don't know where I got, but
Yeah.
I rejected both of his options, and this is what I'm for. And
Yeah.
again, something that stays with me 40 years later.
Yeah, that's wonderful. But that's when you know that it comes from a different place, right?
Come
That it's
on
really
now.
something that comes out. Yeah. And look here. So now you must have been a pretty good athlete. You played in West Virginia. You were also captain of at least
Yeah,
one year, right?
I
Yeah.
sure did. Stephen, I walked on, met a guy from Pittsburgh who
Yeah.
walked on as well. We got there in January, so no one was there, and two brothers, and let's become roommates. So we ended
Yeah.
up both being roommates. We both walked on. I got a scholarship after a semester. He got a scholarship after 1 year, and he ended up being redshirted. So in my senior year, we both ended up starters, were productive players, but we also were both elected captain. My
Wow.
senior year, I was elected captain by my teammates, and Harvey was elected captain the next year in his senior year as well. So we both went from roommates, walk-ons,
Yeah.
team captains over the
Wow.
course of
That's amazing. That's
it. It was
amazing.
a
And
great
you
journey.
must have been pretty good because you got drafted by the NFL.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
I did, and my cousins still tease me because one of my uncles said, "So Johnny, you got drafted in the 99th round."
uh,
They were hard on me, boy. I mean,
yeah.
they were wonderful brothers. But I was a low round draft pick, but competed hard and got a chance to join the Cincinnati Bengals and still have great relationships there in Cincinnati. My coach, Jim Anderson, is a legend, legendary coach, period, but particularly for running backs. Just a super, super guy. And he's still there doing great things in Cincinnati, although he's retired now. It was a great experience. I tell
Yeah.
people, Stephen, that when I was with the Bengals, this was in the late 80s, 88, 89, we went to the Super Bowl, we were good. And when they cut me, they went 13 straight years without a winning season. you put two and two together.
Yeah, look, I got it. I got it. Hey, you know, I'm so glad we had this conversation because you used the word competed. You said you competed.
Hey,
And here you are decades later, competition, competitive
yeah.
is a part of your, but yeah, but we'll get more to that. I just find that interesting that, you know, that competition was something that was important to you early on. And I'm curious about how football informs your work today. But look, I got to ask you, Johnathan, you were a jock.
Yeah.
But you were much more than a jock. I mean, you got into college, you did well, you went into law school. What was that? What was driving you, guiding you, you know, to be successful, to compete in the classroom, and also to target law as an area of study afterwards, after football?
Well, you're very gracious, if not generous, Steve, and I appreciate that. And looking back, and it's something my cousins and I talk about a lot. And I hope I'm in the spirit of the podcast when I say this. We often describe our family as basic Black. We are
Huh.
fundamentally sound Black people. We do things, we are deacons in church. I have a family of preachers and teachers and deacons and auto workers. And we all have homes. We all get up and go to work. We just do basic Black people stuff. And within that DNA, and I'm not even sure it was conscious, it was just the way it was. There was an expectation. You know, when you finished high school, yeah, we didn't go nuts, and family didn't go nuts about graduating from high school. Yeah, congratulations, way to go. Now what you gonna do? You know, it was just that, and it wasn't anything over the top or any demanding kind of thing. It was just an expectation that you were expected to represent us and represent yourself and be, you know, a credit to your race, a credit to our people, a credit to our family. So having that kind of a family life and not even knowing it was happening until you look back on it and see what it meant to yourself and your family, particularly your cousins that you grew up with. And I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Something as simple like that, an expectation. That's wonderful. Now, you know, you earned a master's degree before you earned a law degree. So why did you choose law to as your advanced, you know, a graduate degree? Why law?
Yeah. When I was cut from the Bengals, and you know, 30 plus years later, I can say I was cut and not waived or released. I was cut from the Bengals. I made a run up to the CFL in Canada and spent about 2 months in Toronto with the Argonauts the next year. So that was 91. And when I was cut from the Argonauts, and just a side note, that was a kind of sad situation because cut day, they didn't knock on my door. So I must have made the team. And then we are about ready to go into morning meetings after breakfast. I think I made the team. And the GM came over and grabbed me and said, "Come with me." It's like, oh man. So when that happened, that pretty much that ended my football career. Went back to Cincinnati, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. A friend of mine, as a matter of fact, Vibrant White. I think you're connected to Vibrant as
Yes,
well.
I am. Yes.
Vibrant suggested I enroll in graduate school. And I think his point was you need some time to think, but you also need to be building as you're thinking. And that really created some space for me to continue to grow educationally, academically, and in terms of my own awareness and so forth, and have time to think about what I wanted to do. And at the conclusion, right at the end of my program, had a chance to pursue an EDD, I believe it was, not a PhD, but an EDD or a law degree. And I was accepted into both programs and decided, you know, I think the law degree gives me more flexibility. Wasn't that I had any great passion for the law, but Stephen, I'm telling you, everyone talks about how a poor lawyer can screw things up, can screw up a meeting. A good creative lawyer is a help in every situation, not just law. It's a way of thinking, and the thinking is aligned with how our nation is structured and gives you someone at the table with an ability to navigate those structures. The legal education for me was just a great, great asset.
Right, and that shows up in your work, and we're going to take a deep dive into that. But I still want to stay with this because, I mean, your background is so interesting. I really want people to get to know you beyond in competitiveness, but also with competitiveness being the centerpiece. Now, you became a practicing attorney, if I'm right, and also a prosecutor. Am I correct about that?
Yeah.
So tell us a little about those experiences.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I clerked in the Hamilton County Prosecuting Attorney's Office in the civil division. And the civil division is essentially corporate defense. You are defending the county, the elected, appointed officials, the departments, etc., from civil lawsuits. So again, it was a great education and training. Over and above law school, that's when I really got a chance to understand how, particularly, fundamentals of civil rights law. And little insight. I'm sure I'm not the only person. You grow up with the civil rights movement, and, for maybe without thinking more deeply about it, you say, oh, the civil rights laws and the Civil Rights Act that come out of the Black experience, those are for us. No, they're for everybody. That was a contribution not just for us. It certainly came substantially out of our experience and our struggle, but it benefits the whole nation. And not just Black people can file suit under the Civil Rights Act. We are a minority of folks who sue under the Civil Rights Statute. But the point is, even though it came out of our experience, they're not just for us. They're for the nation. And being in the civil division of the prosecuting attorney's office, handling a lot of civil rights cases that help bring that home over and above the more sterile education and the book learnings of law school.
That's a huge, huge insight. The Congressman, Robert Brown Elliott, in 1875, a Black congressman from South Carolina, my home state, he rose on the floor of the House of Representatives and gave a speech in defense of the Civil Rights Act. And one of the things that he said, I know y'all are going to think that I'm defending this bill because I'm Black, but that's not the case. This bill is a symbol of liberty for all Americans here now and those who come into the country later on. Exactly, Johnathan, what you've just said. So that's awesome. But look, I want to move on. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You going to respond to that?
No, I'm just co-signing if I can. I'm joining in. I'm joining in.
Yeah, I tell you what, you belong to a great tradition for sure in making that statement. But you were also head of the White House's HBCU initiative. Tell us about, that's a great appointment. How did you feel when you were selected, first of all, and how do you think you all did?
When I got the call, I didn't expect to get a call that they were interested in me. I don't have a partisan political background. It's just never been my thing. I'm certainly a responsible citizen, and I vote and I choose where I put that vote as well, but I don't have a partisan background. And most of the other, not most, all of the other previous executive directors were educators. I'm not an educator per se. I'm an economic development, economic competitiveness guy as well. So after the first interview, and it looked like I had a real shot to get it. Then I wanted it. I wanted it badly. And I'm fresh off of publishing my book, The Future Economy and Inclusive Competitiveness. And for me, it was an opportunity to join the big leagues and put everything I thought I knew to the test. That's exactly what I did. Translated inclusive competitiveness into HBCU competitiveness. If anyone, how about this, Stephen? If anyone wanted to predict what I do, all they had to do was read my book. That's all I did, was implement the ideas that I expressed in the book as well. And from top to bottom, the initiative was the most impactful and productive in the 40-year at that time. It was about 40-year history of executive orders and HBCU initiatives. So I'm very proud of the work we were able to do.
That's fantastic. It seems to me that moving the needle, we'll talk about your podcast at the very end if you have time, but moving the needle seems to be a part of your DNA because, as I understand it, you, along with the NAACP, worked on an initiative called Home. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when I left the prosecutor's office, actually, when I was in law school, I was very active in the NAACP under a wonderful president, Dr. Milton Hinton. And Dr. Hinton, I called him one day and I said, we had known a little bit of each other. I had met him. He was a retired UC professor, Milton Hinton, in the Department of Education. And we met. I didn't know him well, but I called him and said, you know, he was the new president and I wanted to support, you know, the NAACP. And he said, aren't you in law school? I said, yeah. He said, well, shouldn't you be concentrated on law school? I said, man, I can do both. I can do both. So he brought me in and I began to work with him over the course of his presidency. And he ended up doing 6 years, and I was right with him all 6 of those years. And when I went into private practice, left the civil division of the prosecutor's office, ended up joining with Housing Opportunities Made Equal, HOME, and the NAACP to file suit in a housing discrimination case. And the housing discrimination case led to a settlement, and I was really an engineer of the bigger part of the settlement, which would fund what became the American Dream Accounts program of $750,000 of earned housing grants of $2,500 each that would be awarded to purchase homes. And here's how the math works, Stephen. Average price of a house in Cincinnati back then was $70,000. For a down payment, you needed at least 5% down. So the program would provide $2,500 to match 2.5 to 1, $1,000 of savings. And if the participant goes to homeowner literacy and training programs, et cetera, to qualify to put a $2,500 coupled with their own $1,000, that's the 5% down for a home in Cincinnati as well. So yeah.
Wow. So you all did move the needle in that particular case in Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's we awesome. Did. It's a contribution, and that still animates me, Stephen, is to do what I'm able to do. And that really comes out of football. I wanted to compete at the level I thought I can compete in. Ultimately, you flame out. But I would rather have flamed out having given my max than flame out without giving my max. And so that animates, frankly, my entire career.
Right. I think it's inspiring. In fact, I think your career what you're doing now is inspiring. But what caught me by surprise, I wouldn't have expected a jock, a lawyer, to get involved with economics.
Yeah,
So what pointed you into that direction? Do you recall what pointed you here, economics?
absolutely. When you're coming up and you're back in the 80s, we used to call it knowledge. You're devouring knowledge. And I'm talking about the big scholars from Martin Delaney to Right Reverend David T. Walker and Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells, Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and Dr. King, and W.E.B. Du Bois. You just getting it all in, just from everywhere. Dr. Ben Yakinen, Ivan Van Sertima, Sheikh and the Joke. When you're devouring all that, you recognize pretty early that economic piece is essential.
Yeah.
But here's where it really intensifies. Not just the customary economic stuff. And this is where the light went on. Practicing law, doing my thing. I'm one of the people coming up in Cincinnati, one of the emerging folks and all that, all the hallmarks. Got a call from the Chamber of Commerce president who asked me, would I be interested in helping the chamber figure out its role in the new economy? So this was 99, 2000. I said, let me call you back. So I started digging. Right in front of my face, all of this stuff was emerging. It was invisible to me. Now, I'm one of the young, up-and-coming, connected people. Yeah. And it was an invisible economy. And here's when the epiphany happened. All that work we were doing with the NAACP and community stuff, it was the Lord's work. But we knew we weren't moving the needle. And the only answer we had was to try harder. This epiphany about the new economy, the innovation economy, said, no. It's not just a matter of degree. It's a matter of kind. We got to do new stuff.
Okay.
And connect into what we now call the competitiveness levers of regional, state, and the national economy as well. Yeah. Not just where we're often relegated. Thumbs up. It's all the Lord's work. But many of those opportunities just don't have the elasticity to provide economic mobility in the competitiveness levers of the innovation economy. That's where you find true wealth creating opportunities as well. So that was the epiphany. It's not just degree, it's kind. And we need to do some needle moving stuff if we want the needle.
And we will dig deeper into that for sure. But I still want people to get a feel for you because, hey, I would say you are a steadfast capitalist. Is that right? So tell me, what's your sense of capitalism?
Yeah, I think my sense of capitalism is that it offers and can incent individuals to create unlike any other economic system that has ever been implemented. It is by far not a perfect system, and many of the critiques of capitalism from others help you better understand what capitalism is and can be completely unfettered. So I'm comfortable with some of the critique that offer a balance and a tempering of the system. But fundamentally, the personal incentive to create and then participate in the value that I help create, while also providing new resources that are taxed and support the common good. fundamentally, while far from perfect,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a better system currently
Yeah.
operating in the world than good capitalism.
Yeah.
What I
You know,
think.
that's one thing I really like about you is that you're all about the good of all. You're all about moving that needle. And we're going to get more into this as we go deeper. But one more thing we got to put on the table for people to really get a sense of your thinking. It seems to me, and correct me if I got this wrong, that you're a big champion of entrepreneurship. You're all for it. You want entrepreneurs out there. Tell us, where you stand there.
Yeah, let me give you the context of that.
Okay.
The best definition of entrepreneurship I've ever read comes from Professor Howard Stevenson, Harvard professor of entrepreneurship emeritus, often called the godfather of entrepreneurship studies. And this is how he defines entrepreneurship: the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. Talking about possibility.
Yeah.
Nothing about business creation. And that's where we kind of get it twisted. Business creation is an expression of entrepreneurship. It is not entrepreneurship unto itself. When I left on the Greyhound bus from Detroit to Morgantown, West Virginia, that was pursuing opportunity beyond the resources that I control. So entrepreneurship is a way of thinking, acting, living, doing. It's pursuit of education, pursuit of the next better. And in some ways, feel me on this, because I'm going to get a little bit off track. The Wealth of Nations was published in March of 1776. And it talks about the conversion from resources that nation's wealth is bound up in gold versus the new way of thinking. It's bound up in the productive capacity of its people. The United States, after that treatise in March of 1776, what happened 4 months later? So this notion of pursuit, the pursuit of the better, the pursuit of a more perfect union, the pursuit of happiness that you see here, that's an entrepreneurial kind of ethos, if you will. So I think our nation was conceived in it with an entrepreneurial ethos as well.
Wow.
So I know I'm connecting a lot of dots, but thanks for giving me a lot of time.
Look, that's great. I mean, Johnathan Holifield is also a scholar. I'm discovering as well. Yeah. But look, we're going to get closer to this book now. Not yet, but I want to still tease out a few other things. You are known as the architect of inclusive competitiveness. And I want us to get a handle on what that is. What does that mean to be the architect of inclusive competitiveness?
Yeah, it means it's hard. And I'm a former lawyer, so I don't speak in complete absolutes. But it will be hard to find any place prior to me that connected inclusion with U.S. competitiveness. I haven't found anything, so I'm going to allow a little bit that it might exist, but I haven't seen. And the point is, my exposure to the innovation economy and to U.S. competitiveness and global competitiveness and regional competitiveness. And then you start looking at policy and legislation, and you say, man, every place I see the term competitiveness in law and policy and regulation or whatever, it's always followed by the best stuff, the most important stuff for U.S. competitiveness, to improve U.S. competitiveness, to improve state competitiveness, to improve regional competitiveness. And it's always attached to the best areas of opportunity. and inclusion, and not just the customary areas where underestimated folks have been relegated, but into the best opportunities that not only strengthen the nation, but create greater opportunities for us to pull down wealth and participate in the value that we create. So architecting a framework beginning with policy, the great enabler, both public and private policy, and then moving through new narrative, new education practices, new organizational practices, new kinds of exploration. And the final area is the freedom to fail. Essentially, in the underestimated communities, you get one at bat. But that's not how the innovation economy works. We tolerate failure. But when it comes to underestimated or underserved communities, if your program or your initiative fails, that's it. You don't get another at bat. So this notion of architecting the elements of what I believe can help improve, strengthen communities was very important, and I'm proud to play that role.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm glad to hear your voice out there, because you're all for competition and being competitive. You're all for that. But then you ring a bell, Johnathan, that I'm hearing more and more as I learn more about you. You're saying, wait a minute, there are underestimated populations here. So help us get clear when you say that underestimated populations, and this, who are you talking about? Can you give us about 2 or 3 names here, or groups?
It's a term that's probably synonymous with historically underserved, disconnected folks who are not contributing hugely to the key areas of our nation and our economy, and thus are not extracting personal and familial or community value from those areas of the economy. And here's the underlying imperative, Stephen. Post-World War II, the United States emerged as the clear global economic leader. And we won the post-World War period up until today. We're being challenged, particularly by China, economically, but really next 70 or so years, the undisputed dominant global economic power. We did that with one hand tied behind our backs. But the world was different then. The continent, Africa, emerging from colonialism. Europe in shambles. India is not a market economy. China is working its way through the Cultural Revolution, on its way to making up its own form of capitalism. What the heck is state-sponsored capitalism? What the heck is that? They made up their own form of market economics, if you will, as well. So as in the post-war period, in a different world, today, there are billions of smart people all over the world. Hell, they're smart. We are too. Let's get it on. But we can no longer do it without the other hand in the fight. And that other hand is the rest of us. We only have 330, 40 million people. These other places have billion plus. Can't beat them on aggregate numbers, so we got to win on per capita. So we need a higher productivity per person to match their overwhelming numbers in the global economy. So that's the fundamental imperative.
Yeah, I mean, I get this feeling as I study you and your work, is that you say, American competitiveness had its day, it got us here. But if you want to go forward, inclusive competitiveness, has to be embraced. Am I getting it right? Am I getting?
You can't say it any better. And the world has changed. There are billions of more competitors who are increasingly free. Maybe not free in the American sense of freedom, but freer to express their genius in the market. Everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want to maintain our
Yeah.
standard of living and our global leadership, I don't want to say global dominance, that's not my point,
Yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
be at the head of the class, we need more productivity from many more people.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Uh-huh.
rest of us have to come along.
I love it, and for the good of everyone. Now, I want to harken back again to your athletic career from the earliest years you were playing into the NFL. Do you think is that informing you? Is that informing you when you see that you competed on the field, you put it on the field? You want to see is that informing you, Johnathan?
It does, without a doubt, when the term resonated with my soul.
Mm,
But the term doesn't just mean trying hard. It
hmm
certainly means try hard, but it doesn't only mean try hard.
yeah.
It's try hard in the key areas that will disproportionately determine our economic future.
Mm,
Here's a
hmm
piece, some of the, people who are, you know, they are less competitive and we need more collaboration and less competition. I don't know,
uh-huh.
but I certain there's room in the party for all the ideas. So I'm not pushing them out. I'm just saying,
Mm,
but here's the point, Stephen,
mm,
and something I learned in sports: the highest and best form of competition at the end of the day
mhm.
is with yourself.
Yeah,
Look here,
yeah.
man. If I was a 70 as a running back
Uh-huh.
and Bo Jackson was a 100, if I got all of my ability out of there and
Mhm,
reached my absolute potential,
mhm.
and he just came close. He didn't quite reach 100. Let's say he reached
Mhm.
90. He's still
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
still just
yeah,
a tremendously better
yeah,
athlete than I am.
uh,
So if he
mm,
meets his max was higher than my max, and I'm
yeah,
fine with that. I can't make up what I don't have. My
yeah,
challenge is to optimize my own
mm,
endowments,
yeah,
intellectually, athletically, as well. So
yeah,
that's really the
yeah.
objective. Get the
That's
most
fun.
you can out of you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when that happens, the whole ship rises. But look, I want to go to your book now because book titles advertise
Yep.
something. I think a good book title points us in a certain direction, and you got to get into the book. This is the way it goes. And I want to look at I want to state your title again, and I want to ask you some specific things about the parts of this title, okay?
Sure.
So the title of your book, The Future Economy Inclusive Competitiveness, How Democratic Trends and Innovation Can Create Economic Prosperity for All Americans. Now, I want to look at just the first clause, Johnathan, the future economy. Help us understand what you are pointing to when you use that phrase, future economy.
Yeah, great question, Stephen. And I'm pointing to the imperative that I talked about, not
Mhm.
the past economy. We were globally dominant. Again, the best metaphor I can use is we fought with one hand.
Mm,
Women behind the back, Black people behind the back,
yeah.
Hispanic behind the back, rural population behind the back. And we still were dominant, but the
Mm,
world was different. The
mm,
future economy will require this hand getting in the fight,
mhm,
and this hand is the rest of us.
mm,
And
mm.
that's the idea. And then that leads to the second half of that title.
Yeah. Okay, but before we go there, because I'm getting it. It's like we've done well, but we did well without all of us engaged in this. And that's where you're pointing us, isn't it? To bring all of us along.
But we did well under a different world. China wasn't a market economy. They hadn't yet found their way in terms of the Mao Revolution, the Cultural Revolution, and what they're going to be. They hadn't found their way. India was not a market economy. Europe was in shambles after World War I and II. Africa is a continent. Many of the nations were just getting out of colonialism. They're all competitors now. This is what I mean by billions of competitors are increasingly freer. Again, maybe not free in the American sense of freedom, but certainly freer to express their genius.
Okay, got it. Yeah,
this
future economy, and then this clause, your signature, inclusive competitiveness. So all of the people that groups that you've identified, they got to be enrolled in this economy to push us forward. Okay.
All hands on deck.
All hands on deck. Okay. Now, demographic trends, is that a part of what you've just said, or is this something? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. No. Okay, great. All right. So create this economic prosperity. So what are you pointing to then? Are you saying that when we get all hands on deck, the entire country will flourish even more than we've seen before, or is there something else?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And it's as close to a guarantee as you can get, because the more productive our people are, particularly within the areas of our economy that are disproportionately determining our economic future, the more value they can contribute and pull down. Let me add this dimension. You've heard of trickle down, right?
Yep, sure. Yep, for sure.
As a metaphor, trickle down, if you look at a faucet, right? And it's trickle down, that means somebody has to turn on the faucets and then trickle down, and you receive the benefit that others create for you. Well, I'm not a big fan of trickle down. I'm more a fan of pull down. Empowering folks to reach up, grab hold, contribute value to the economy, then pull down value for themselves, their families, and communities, because they have the tools, they have the knowledge, they have the wherewithal, they have the skills. So much of today's discussion, Stephen, around equity has focused on fairness, as it should. But perhaps as much, if not more important as fairness, equity also means ownership. Right?
Yeah.
So if you have the knowledge, skills, and talent, you own those. And that knowledge, skill, and talent gives you an equity stake, an underlying interest in your local, state, and ultimately our national economy. I own something that's valuable in this economy.
Yeah, okay. Well, you've just opened my eyes on something. You've just opened my eyes on what you meant about human assets. Yeah, now I'm getting it. Okay. Hey, look, I got to ask you, because you talk about the 20th century, not in a dismissive way, but you talk about the economic narrative of the 20th century that was then. But it seems to me you suggest that that narrative same narrative would not be effective in the 21st century, that we need a new narrative. Help us understand that.
Well, we've talked about it, and that underlying narrative is AHOD, all hands on deck. And how does a nation of 330 million, compete with nations and continents of twice and three times that much. We can't win on aggregate numbers. We have to win on per capita. How about this? Are you a football fan?
Yes, I am.
All right. Let's take the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, no one can compete with the SEC from now Texas to Florida, South Carolina in terms of the kind of football players you get in that area. So what did the Big Ten do? They got California and Washington and the rest of the Midwest, not over in New York and Maryland and other. You hear what I'm saying? They can't compete with the SEC. So they got to get more people to compete. You feel me?
I get it. I get it. And, and that's the incentive. That's the incentive for policymakers. Hey, we got to include everyone if you're going to be competitive. So, what's stopping us from just doing this tomorrow or next year?
Former lawyer.
Okay.
And I've rarely, and I don't speak in absolutes, but I have never seen a great offer without a great demand.
Okay, got you.
And there's a lot of narrative going around and a lot of good sounding words, thumbs up. I support it all, thumbs up. But I don't hear that crystal clear voice connecting inclusion to the competitiveness of the nation. And not just as a good thing to do. And again, I recognize a lot of those things and a history that has been torrid in many respects, particularly for Black people. But ultimately, this life, it's kind of analogous to driving a car, right? And you check, in order to drive safely, you better check that rear view mirror and see what's behind you. But you can't drive like this.
Gotcha. That's for sure. I mean, the whole notion of narratives is huge, I think, not only in economics, but in other areas of our life as well. But as busy as you are, sir, as busy as you are, you co-host a podcast show. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I kind of described how we got the name, Moving the Needle, where, comes from the epiphany I had 25 years ago that, oh my, if we want to move the needle, we got to do needle moving stuff. And we were not in the needle moving areas of our economy. And my partner, Christopher Gergen, and I is just a wonderful guy. We got to know each other probably a decade ago. He founded a group in Raleigh, North Carolina, Forward Impact and Forward Cities. A lot of the same things that I believe and was trying to accomplish, Christopher is doing as well. And we decided to come together and try to highlight policymakers, investors, social innovators who were also working to create the best possible conditions to transform underestimated talent, underestimated human assets into sources of national, state, local competitive advantage.
Wow. Look, I love it. I love it. And you talk about a lot of things aimed at moving the needle.
That's right.
Look, so I really enjoyed our time together today, but let me just give you one of those broad questions. Is there anything else you want to put on the table that we haven't already discussed?
You were such a prepared host and such an enjoyable interviewer. I think we covered the waterfront. how about this? Just as a concept for your listeners to keep in mind. A lot of good stuff going, a lot of talk, a lot of good words, and so forth. Um, what's the other way? I don't see another way other than putting in work and producing and being a fundamentally sound person, a good citizen, and contributing to your community and your nation and strengthening. I don't see another way.
Yeah, yeah.
So as we amp up with a lot of dialogue and a lot of things we have to overcome, there's no doubt. But other than that hard work and putting it in, I don't see another way. And if you have another way, I'd like you to share it with me.
There you have it, folks. If you have another way, contact Johnathan
Yes.
Holifield. And look, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I kept thinking that if I were the next president of the USA, I'm not sure if you would take the job, but I would appoint you Secretary of Commerce and see if that would help us move the needle and also make the world a better place. So
Let me improve that. Having served in the federal government, that's not the role I want. The role that I want, being a little lighthearted, would be someone in the cabinet with responsibility to move not just the Department of Commerce, but all of the federal agencies across the board.
Okay. Well, look, we got to get
Even
you.
for the president and how we have to do this work, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but we have to make sure that your name is before whoever gets elected. Yep. But look, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for being with me today, Johnathan.
Stephen, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your preparation. Thank you for the depth in your inviting interview style. I enjoyed our conversation, and I hope your listeners will as well.
Okay. Well, you've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Johnathan Holifield. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day. You are not